let's start sonically and like just an overview of the lyrics, and then let's walk song by song through them.
Yeah, so To the Hopeless, from like a sonic standpoint, I really wanted, there's like this really drony kind of like cello string sound that just kind of like pulls you. And like, I just think sometimes when you feel hopeless, like it just feels very much like you're being pulled. And it's like, I don't even know, like you're almost in autopilot. So I really wanted to kind of create like an instrumentalization of that feeling. Yeah. And so yeah, there's like this kind of pulling feeling. There's some harp and keys kind of that add a lightness. Every song sonically, I wanted to try to somehow combine the feeling and the initial and then the result. From a project standpoint, it was like I wanted it to try to encompass the whole dialogue through instruments. And so if you listen to it like from an instrumentalized, like just an instrumental of it, I want you to try to feel like what what's going on.
I remember Dave and I, after hearing, I think To the Hopeless, I think that was the first song we heard, we're like, yeah, but can I sit in like the instrumental for like another 3 to 6 minutes? Well, so then tell me lyrically for To the Hopeless.
Yeah, so this one actually came so quickly. I probably wrote this in like 30 minutes. Okay. And it happened because I was telling Mitch the other day, this song has been in me for about 3 years. So as much as the first few lyrics, like, the ache of a dream lost to the grave, the pain of a resurrection that never came. That's actually super metaphorical for many, many people. Like where you are in your life, you thought you'd be somewhere else. Like I had this dream of having this by this time and I don't, the pain. It's a very literal lyric for myself. This is all stemmed from the baby that my husband and I lost in 2019. I know the pain of a resurrection that never came. Like I know the ache of a dream lost to the grave. I watched my child not live, and I prayed very, very hard. I've never prayed that hard in my life. And that resurrection, it didn't happen. And I just wanted to be honest about that. Like we processed a lot of that pain initially and like how to lead through that. And I just wanted to be honest about like, hey, I'm a pastor, and like there's a place in my life where like I'm actually like not okay, like, and there was a hopelessness in that stage, and just like the hopelessness of sitting on the bathroom floor, which is like what Dave captured in the lyric video. I kind of processed with him, like, hey, this is exactly what I was doing on that day. This is exactly when I think of hopelessness, this is exactly what I remember. Sitting on the bathroom floor, the windows over here, the light, it was in the morning, there was light, and I just remember not being able to get up off the floor. I know Jesus. I walked with Jesus my whole life. But it was very, very hard to remember the truth about who he was in that moment.
I think what captures in the thing that Dave created for the lyric video, the art that he created for the lyric video, was that idea of like the light is streaming in. Yeah, it's which right it's there, but you're like, I'm stuck here, hopeless. Yeah. Well then, okay, To the Anxious starts out with an instrumental that is pretty like anxious-y.
Yes.
I've gotten so many texts about it so far, and I'm like, yes, we did what we wanted to do.
It goes from like a nice little lull at the end to the hopeless to like right in your face, and you're like, oh my gosh, did I click on the wrong thing? Like,
so what's cool, I mean, and this is, nerdy, what I did with that is I have actually this like this instrument that is just like a bunch of like chatter, like people chattering. So it's like, ooh, ah, ooh, ooh, ooh. So it like, I put that and I put all this delay in it to where it would like just sounded like chaos. Cause like when I think of anxiety, it's like, you can't settle on a thought. Yeah. And then I took the guitar part that's at the end and I put that in the front too, where it resolves in the end, and it's like, okay, I can sing because I'm happy, and we're singing this song believing that God sees the sparrow, so he sees me. Like that resolves in this like dueling melody of two kind of guitars playing something, but in the beginning it's way out of place. Like it feels out of place sonically compared to where the other song ended, but it like rises to like, and then it drops to like the piano part, and but there's still like, even when it drops and we kind of remove a lot of the instrumentalization, you have this like trilly guitar that's like just like like just like going really hard. Like what I wanted in this song was to try to maybe capture the idea that you can hold peace and anxiety at the same time. That I think sometimes we have this idea that like, if God's peace, then why do I still feel anxious? And it's because His peace can be present in the mix of your anxiety, in the same way that hope can be present in the midst of hopelessness. And so this idea of like, some of the chaos in the song still exists, and then, but lyrically you resolve, like I think way stronger than some of the other songs. Like you resolve way, like more clearer than some of the other songs. So I was like, let the lyrics be this idea of sitting on top of some of this maybe still feeling unrefined, you know?
Yeah. Actually, a lot of this is a rewrite of the traditional hymn.
Yeah, this is the one.
This is the rewrite of the traditional hymn, His Eyes on the Sparrow. And I actually co-wrote this one with your wife.
Yeah, she's pretty cool.
Alyssa, she's wonderful. Alyssa is like one of my favorite people to write with. So her and I were sitting at my dining room table. Your son was brand new. And every time we try to get an idea, he would get a little frustrated. And so we were like, okay, let's kind of lean into what happens. Like what this is feeling like right now, like this is what, you know, anxiety is. And we were processing through anxiety. And so I just am like, I have so much peace. Whenever I feel anxious, I do listen to that traditional hymn. Like the Lauryn Hill version is so strong. And just remembering that like in my anxiety, I feel really unseen and I feel like I'm doing everything alone. Like I feel like I'm in a cave and I feel like this. It's like super claustrophobic in my mind. And this reality that His eye is on the sparrow, so I know He's watching me. And so like I kind of play around at the beginning with like the beginning of the traditional hymn says, why should I worry? You know, why should I be afraid? And I was like, well, I've heard it sung like I should not let my heart be troubled, but I am. Like I know the truth, but I am. And so I wanted this to just resolve really strong of like, no, I feel this way, but here's truth, and I will continue to, I'm gonna say it, and I will scream it until I can get in alignment with it. So it ministers across, like, it's the lyrics across.
Yeah, when I listened to it, because I had forgotten that Alyssa helped write that, and when I listened to it, and it resolves on that hymn, I was like, oh, there's something familiar here.
Yeah.
And oftentimes in that, like, anxiety place, you're like, I just need something familiar.
Right.
And so it's good. And then the next is to Those in Despair.
Yeah, this one, so there's this like cool little, like, it's like a descending kind of melody that's kind of droney, and I wanted to really feel like you're like going into it. But then there's also this, again, like this mirrored like piano line that kind of feels like optimistic. It almost feels like this song for me is one of my favorites, but it is like oddly optimistic, even though you're talking about like despair. Those two parts like kind of counteracting it. I almost felt like there's that idea of like an exchange of like, this is hurting to even to express, and yet there's like this weird, like almost like soothing kind of like thing that's happening on the same side.
Yeah. So, I mean, originally when we were presented with this idea, there's a lot of back and forth between Kim's letter here. It was to the discouraged, like another way to say it. And it's crazy in the process of writing this. There is a lyric. My son's middle name is Courage. And so there's a line that says, courage will earn all its victory, because there is a promise this won't be your destiny. And it was like right when this song was done, we kind of went into this season with him that was like a little bit scary. And so I felt a lot of this feelings in this. And I just wanted to, I like the wordplay in this one. One of my favorite lyrics is, the truth bent only slightly is still a lie. Because I think that's where the enemy really gets us with the discouragement. He tells you so much of the truth, but it just skewed just a tiny bit, and it's enough to haunt you. It's enough to discourage you. And so I just wanted to kind of play around with that idea. And Kim has a line in her letter about strength and joy being the gifts that you obtain when you make it through this. And so I just wanted to go back and forth between her writings and my own.
And even from some of the visualizations that then we created afterwards, this is the part, and in story structure, this is kind of like Dark Night of the Soul-esque. Like we've walked from like the hopeless portion to the anxious, which we had the cave with the light streaming in, but now we're at the mouth of the cave. What I mean, and it's kind of looking forward. Where did that kind of play into some of the stuff that you were creating?
I mean, so much of those were from the conversation that we had in the office, just about like what is in, like visually, what is in your head, and what is this journey that this like shadow-faced woman in these different images is going through. How do I marry both the current with the hope of the future? And how do I like present somebody with both, like, yes, the reality and the weight of this like thing, this despair, this anxiety, whatever, with also this the reality and the hope of peace and joy. You know, each of the pieces has a prevailing light source in each one. I really liked the idea of like, I want like blinding light, like way too high exposure light blasting through in some part of the scene. And so, yeah, it's all of the pieces are very dark. This is that moment of this woman looking out into like, I've been in the darkness, I've been through like this cave, this like tunnel vision, literally, and now I'm finally like at the mouth, and I'm seeing the world now, and it's a stormy sea out there. Like I've beaten this like tunnel vision, and now I'm looking like I've found freedom in that, but the freedom that I've found is now just this even bigger chaotic scene.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, as far as story structure, I'm like, I don't know if this gets to be like the
There's a
conventional
kind
of thing, but it is kind of this like, I've broken through, but what I broke through into is now.
It's like the gift of a whole new world is that now you have to figure out how to navigate.
Yes, exactly,
world,
exactly. Which then goes into fear of now this girl now sitting at the edge of this body of water and just like reflecting on herself and life, like, where do I go?
The music is kind of ethereal and light, so there's this like harp, arp, so it's like, yeah, and it's really plucky and it's nice and it feels like at ease, but then, so I use this like kick drum and then this kind of like, a lo-fi shaker, just kind of really saturated drum thing, and it kind of is like a slight like homage to like horror movies, like where it's like
we ever want to do,
like those kind of like, and I know this is like too technical, but like but maybe someone will like it. I use like a stereo delay to where it's delaying on different sides of your ears. Like if you listen to it like with stereo, like in stereo, you're listening to it like kind of play off of each other, and that kick is like, and that like, in some ways it's that feeling of like, when you walk outside and it's dark and you hear a noise and you're like not really sure where you hear it, and I feel like to try to like to where the percussion in this, even though it's subtle, was trying to be like, in my like artistic expression, was trying to make you feel like, well, the drums are over here and they're over here and they're over here, and it's not dominant, but it's subtle and it's there and it's kind of pushing the song forward, and then everything else is ethereal. And I think that's the lie of feeling fear, is that like, unless it's extreme, you don't feel like you're actually afraid. But it's like we were just saying, handing someone a brand new world, they have to figure out how to do it. Yeah. And I think if we could get honest, going like, hey, you know what? Every birthday, now you have to figure out how to live this year and make subtle changes and look back in what worked and what didn't work, what you have to change. And there's always a fear of any new thing, stepping into any sort of health in your life. It's like, is this gonna work? Yeah. If I'm gonna set these boundaries, is it gonna work?
I love what you just said. Like that fear exists with a lot of courage. And so this song, like Cody was talking about, it starts off a lot brighter and then kind of dissolves instead. So it moves in the opposite direction sonically as the other songs do. And there was intentionality behind that because we kind of approached fear from a different angle. I'm actually have experienced all of these emotions up until this point. But because I feel like something is expected of me, like as a mom, as a wife, as a pastor, as a person, I have shoved them all down. they're existing. They're in this like dark cave inside of my chest, and no one fully knows the extent outside of maybe like Dr. Karen, my counselor, who knows all of our dark caves. But it came at it from this reality of like, I'm actually afraid of letting them out, even just a little bit, because if there's a little bit that comes out, then it's just all going to unravel from there. And then what's going to be left? I'm afraid of what's left of me if that happens. And I'm afraid of how I'm going to see myself. I'm afraid of how others are going to see me if I actually because if I let all of this that I've stuffed down for so long out, I'm going to be a different person on the other side of this. Am I going to be a person that my people want to be around and actually like who I am better now that I let everything out and let Jesus work his meticulous, put his meticulous hand on the things that we had stuffed. Like I'm better and I'm stronger. And so like a lot of that, the lyrics starts with like, you've gotten good at faking your laughs. You've timed out your smile and you know where to put your voice inside. You know how to play the game to make people think you're okay. But like that lyric, that bridges into the chorus, like, if you're honest, you don't know if you could face what's below. But truth be told, all great tales actually start in brokenness. Yeah. And they start with hearts that need to be healed. Yeah. And that's the truth. That's the truth. I mean. Well,
I think that's kind of even the point of what we're trying to get with this whole thing is like, if you come to Jesus with your honesty, there's actually, you like yourself better on the other side because it's not hiding. And often then...
When you don't have to make up
who you are on the other
side. And that's the beautiful thing is you're actually making exchange of identity. And I think that, for me, fear is always twofold. Of like, you can be very afraid of the consequence of what circumstances will do to you. Yeah. But then I think there's also a fear that comes, like, anyone that's walked through, like an AA type group, it's like the question that they pose is how free do you want to be? Yeah. But then there's consequences to the choice of walking in freedom. Mm-hmm. And you're afraid at times of like, is embracing this going to, I'm going to have to go into the dark place. I'm going to have to go into the being exposed and honest before, the Lord and my community. Mm-hmm. And I believe that God's going to be kind to me, maybe, depending on how you've known the character of God. I don't always trust that my community is going to accept me, and am I okay with that? And so there is this kind of fear, and it's kind of why this song, it resolves down and then it goes back into like an instrumental to kind of make you linger a little bit into like the I don't know, metaphorically, like the journey is still one that you can like continue.
Well, I think too that transitions you right into loneliness, because I think there's the temptation then to be like, well, fear is going to drive me into loneliness. I can't open up to community.
And you in some ways, even just like within yourself, right? You create a community within yourself that normalizes what you're going through. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so then when you become a different person, it's like you are lonely to the new you. Yeah. And you're alone within yourself. So sonically in this one, like a lot, Lindsey and I were talking a lot. She had some really great ideas of like adding like the sound of like the ocean and waves going in there. And I wanted it to be as reverberated, feel like you're singing in the bathroom by yourself, kind of feeling with the sounds of like the waves of like, if you've ever been, one of my favorite places to be is like in the ocean. But if you've ever been like in the ocean and you just kind of look around and you're like, I am legitimately alone out here. It's like one of the greatest feelings and also scary. Then there's this place where, what's the line?
At the end?
Yeah, that goes right into...
Not a navigator.
Yeah, like that.
You can pitch correct.
Tired of these thoughts and all of their miscalculations. Yeah. And so what we did with that is like, tired of these thoughts and all of their miscalculations. And the idea that I wanted to, again, kind of play on how loneliness has an anxiety and a fear that goes into it. So then there's this repeat of tired of these thoughts, as like when you're the only person talking to yourself, it's actually more lonely when all you're doing is talking to yourself. Mm-hmm. So I wanted that feeling, and then Linz was like, I really want to take like a soundscape from a coffee shop. So I found this, soundscape of like this French cafe, I think, and just played it through. So like you can hear the clattering of like people, you can hear the waves of like feeling like this loneliness, and then that repeated line of tired of these thoughts, and then it like repeats, and then tired of these thoughts. And so it just kind of keeps the same thought over and over again. But what I didn't repeat was in all of their miscalculations, because I think the idea that what happens in loneliness is you forget that sometimes your thoughts are just miscalculations. Sometimes you forget the consequences of your thoughts. So it's just like you just actually become obsessed with your thoughts, and you're obsessed in your own world. And then it resolves to, I think, just like your acoustic guitar that didn't even get tracked into the interface. It was like tracking through the microphone. So it's all like chorusy and like so reverby and like, you know, it's like, like it feels lonely, and it is unintentional, but it sounds awesome.
This was actually one of the ones that I got stuck on for a while. I think I sat here for 2 weeks and was like, I feel so alone. No one understands. You know, it's a typical like existential.
Meanwhile, the rest of the creative team was like, we feel so anxious because we bit off way more. You know, it's like deadlines were like,
we're just like moving through all. I know.
I'm like figuring out how to sonically be like, what are the chords? What are we gonna play?
Just put the chord chart in the drive.
Yeah, I need to know. I can't figure this out.
And I'm just like, I can't finish this song. And I went to Kim with this one. Because she was like, hey, can you get me the lyrics by then? Because God, she's so kind and gracious and efficient.
Kim made this happen.
She really did. This is hers. This is all goes to her. But she wrote in her letter, lost in a sea of people, map in hand, no direction. And I kept thinking of that sailboat, that lonely sailboat that you captured so beautifully. And I was like, that's just actually what it feels like. When you feel lonely, you could actually be out in public and you're surrounded by people. And you can have human interaction. If you go to a coffee shop, you talk to the barista, you can have human, but there's still this like internal loneliness. And I even think about like my kids love the stars and my son loves the moon, and we're outside a lot looking up at the sky. And there's been plenty of nights where I put my kids to bed and I go sit on the back porch and I just look at the stars and I talk to them. And I feel that like those are the moments where in my hardest moments, that's like my spot in my backyard. And I'm thinking of how many times I brought actually these lyrics to Katie and Kim, and I was like, this is all I have. Like, I've been talking to the stars. That's all I have. They're not talking back. And I gave them that first lyric, and they're like, oh my gosh, there's so much here. And they just let me process and threw out a couple of ideas, and we figured it out. But loneliness was super real for me. And I feel like that's so real for a lot of people with the season that we find ourselves in. And just I wanted to honor the feeling and the reality of it. And I think about too, how many times do we just read a line in scripture, then Jesus went off to pray, then Jesus went off to be alone. How many times did he probably just sit there and talk to God and be like, dude, like, what? Like, because he was fully God, but Jesus was fully human. And part of like, I think about Paul talking about like sharing the sufferings of Christ, and immediately we think of the cross, the crucifixion, the beating and all. A lot of the sufferings of Christ were these emotions. Like, Christ knew what it was like to be lonely. His friends bailed on him. Like, he knew what it was like to feel anxious. He was sweating blood in the Garden of Gethsemane the night before he was crucified. Like, Jesus struggled with these things, obviously in a holy and perfect way because he was God. But like, how do we honor these emotions, and how do we honor them well?
And I think for me, there's a subtle challenge within the song too, of like how at times you can be in control. If you're the author of your story, then your thoughts deem the interpretation of your circumstance, right? And that idea of being in a coffee shop, being like, I'm tired of these thoughts. And I just walk with so many people, you know, in coffee shops and talking and processing through like the challenges and struggles of life and following Jesus, or struggles with even wanting to follow Jesus and all of these things. And it's like, what I'm actually hearing is their thoughts, and how often those thoughts actually like boundary you into staying in the same kind of narrative, right? And so it's like that, I really, like for me, I love this song, but it's one of those songs where I'm like, man, you know, it's not as pretty as the other songs, but I think in some ways, like pretty in the sense of, it doesn't resolve into like a nice like orchestral little like it's like I'm tired of these thoughts, and the reason it doesn't resolve is because you have to choose whether you're going to keep saying those thoughts or believing those thoughts. And it's like the difference between loneliness and community is it requires a trust. Do I trust that we can relationally, like, am I willing to risk the consequences of opening up to a new relationship, or am I just going to like stick with the thoughts that I'm already tired of?
It's safer just to back away.
Yeah, you know? Like I can't trust anybody. Tired of these thoughts, and then I'm also lonely.
This was one of those visualizations that was pretty clear from you that you interpreted and created something like almost like whenever you described it and about what you created was like spot on to exactly what was created. What went into that, and then carry me into the final, which is To Those on Mission.
Loneliness, while, you know, despair was that, like, from a story structure, dark night of the soul. Loneliness kind of stood out on its own, in its own right, of like, visually, it's the only one, it's the farthest distance you are from the human, from person experiencing it, which was like intentional in its own right of like, you have all this empty space around, like you have this tiny little dot person and all this empty space. And then you have this sky with all these tiny little dots and all this empty space. And I mean, I thought the visuals were really cool. Honestly, I'm like, most of that comes from Lindsey, because I'm like, it was, hey, let's get some YouTube stuff out, let's try and do it. And thank God you had like any sort of direction for any of these, because it was going to be like just grabbing at straws.
Kind of in reverse, where we've been going, the songs are taken from the book. These visuals were taken directly from the songs, and so you had something in mind.
Yeah, every song had a scene in my head, and I just like translated. And honestly, like the way that he translated them were so much more beautiful than what I saw in my head.
And so it's the darkest one, like just like it's the least amount of light in the actual image.
Your light source is the lighthouse, right?
Very dim. The moon has some, but it's like the light source, so you have this like guiding post. In my head, the story of this woman is like, you're in this bathroom and you're on the ground, and that's just like reality. Like in my head, I was like, all of these songs actually exist on the bathroom floor. Mm-hmm. But you're in it, and then anxiety, like every one of the songs past the bathroom floor is actually what's going on internally in this person of like, oh, I feel like I'm in this cave, you know, and I'm going out, and then I'm at the cusp of this cave, and then I'm at the water, and now I'm finally, you know, get enough courage to like go out on a boat, and I'm just encountering loneliness. But then I finally reach land, and like you look back at like where you've traveled, and then that's where To Those on Mission kind of comes in, of this like warrior stance, like just war woman on on this hillside with this entire journey behind her, and the smoke, and there's like little elements in it that like from the previous songs. And the cool thing about To Those on Mission visually is that you're seeing what was behind her, not what's in front of her. Like she's looking at the camera. You don't see what this is behind the camera, you know? All you see is what this person has walked through. And so I just think it's a cool way of visualizing To Those on Mission, because it's like, you very well, like the reality is you might have to go through some more caves. Like, you know, I didn't want to show like a rainbow is now coming through. It's like, cause it's not happily ever after until we die, you know?
What is it, like Jewish or Hebrew tradition, like looking behind you is actually looking ahead? Mm-hmm. And there's just some...
I'm going to say that was it. Too.
That. But there's something about looking behind to see what God has done through that I think, probably unintentionally, but that kind of is this getting honest with this is allowing you to see.
And just the power of testimony.
When you fail to acknowledge what you've been through, you actually like rid the authority that you have. You know, and I think so many I think people are paralyzed by the fear of getting honest, that they don't actually get to that breakthrough of like, whoa, when I communicate, it's not just empathy, it's knowing how to navigate it. You know, like even you think about some of these lyrics, like, I'm not a navigator. Well, you've navigated loneliness. So like, you might not even have all of the conclusions like resolved, but you kind of are able to walk with others, and it's the best place to start community. There's this lead line that just plays between two notes. And then it evolves into kind of this like little like trilly like wash, and then it goes into two lead lines that come out on either side, and Jim's lead line that kind of pierces through the middle. You know, in what I was trying to make people feel was like, you have to kind of like cut through some of this like exterior, peel back some of the layers and go like, this is what I really went through. And then I can go through, and then it all dies out, you know, and then it's just like Lynn's like with the keys and a little like kind of picked guitar. And then it just goes like, like the drum fill that we put in there, like it's like so out of like context for the rest of the album, you know. And I like when I was tracking it in like my room, like it was like just so loud, like it was ungodly loud, you know. Like I was like, you know, and it's not even like that. It's not that hard. Like I mean, it's not like a heavy song by any means, but there's just like something about the way that it felt heavy after like producing out all these other songs, you know, was like, you know, it's not just me kind of sitting and like playing, you know, keys and like trying to like ad-lib cello parts. It's like, and so like tracking the bass and like in the guitars was like one of this thing where I really wanted it to be like push, like I wanted it to come in and like push. And so there's like, I think there's like 6 drums layered on top of each other, kind of adding this chaos militant, because that was one of the things we talked about, was like, I wanted to feel militant.
Okay, so what's the inspiration first, and then let's get into the lyrics.
So like musically, Mitch and I had a meeting at the beginning of all this, and I'm like, this is what I hear, this is what I want to do sonically, and then of course he just takes it to a whole other level, because it's what he does. My husband and I are huge Marvel fans, and I kind of pulled from like the Winter Soldier here of like this Bucky Barnes, like you're like all-American boy, he's going to World War II, he's gonna go fight the Nazis, you know, and then he gets captured by this weird Nazi offshoot and gets completely mutilated. You see him overcome like this trauma, and so I wanted it to be like a real war-esque type thing, because you've warred, like to win your victory, you gotta war through it. And I just kept thinking of like that storyline of like, you fought so hard for so long, like, and now you're torn apart because of what you thought things were gonna be, they're not. And like a grenade in your safe place, it blew all your dreams away, which life tends to do, you know? And moving on through that, and like, I like that line of like, they're on the front lines, like you earned your battle scars, but now they're not. They're scars, but we don't look at scars as a negative thing. Scars are badges of honor. Scars are crowns of beauty, because like, I did have the darkness. I fought this, and Jesus with me fought this. But now I get to partake in his full victory because I trusted him through it. And here I am on the other side of like, hey, this scar, I'm so proud of it, because it is a testimony that like trusting Jesus in the hard places actually gets you to where you want to go. And
it's like placing or recognizing altars in your life
yes,
where God 100%. Met you.
I think the thing is, if you look at the tension that we tried to create sonically and lyrically and visually as like what you experience, to be on mission is to willingly subject yourself to that again. Like there's part of a mission of life to going like, I am now, because I understand that there is a hope on the other side through Jesus, I'm willing to subject myself to the entirety of life, not just my own, but the burdens of others now. Right. And it's like you realize you're the one that's not fighting your battle, that the Lord has fought your battle, and then he invites you in to partner with him as he fights the battles of other people.